for Kinetic, and thanks for checking out our new series from the floor. One of our goals at Kinetic is improving the level of education in the industry. So we wanted to put out this series to highlight different brokers, to give some just general best practices, quick hitting tips, and like just overall brokering advice. Today we have part 2 of my conversation with Dustin from Elite Transit Solutions. Dustin, thanks for being on, man. You want to do another quick intro for those that didn't catch part 1?
Yep. Thank you again, Nick. Really appreciate you having me. Dustin Widdoss. I am the Vice President of Sales and Operations at the Elite Transit Solutions. We are headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 3 offices elsewhere in the country: Charlotte, North Carolina, Chicago, Illinois, Scottsdale, Arizona, and been with the company for 2 years effectively today. So again, thanks for having me, Nick.
Yeah, man. Happy to have you on. So today we're taking a slightly different direction than usual. I feel like the skills that are needed or learned in brokerage often aren't given enough credit. And because you're another person who came to the industry from another career, I kind of want to get your perspective on it. So there might not be like the actionable takeaways this time, but I think it's an interesting subject. So to kick things off, how did you get into freight?
I love and hate this question. And I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. Again, and I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. I lost my job 3 years ago. Walked in on a Monday morning and it was gone. Was in the process of making some decisions on a career change, which had me planning to move to Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where I'm at right now. Then COVID happened, and really, I was doing some interim work, and COVID happened, and the work I was doing, schools shut down. I was actually substitute teaching in preparation to be an on-site owner of a preschool franchise. I coach elementary wrestling for 9 years, so it was a good fit. I met some great people during my time doing that. And then when the school shut down because of COVID, I'd actually known our CEO of Elite from my time as a financial advisor, which is where I was fired from. And it was, I'll never forget. I think everybody has a pretty rigid memory of the timeline of COVID. We were on our way to load up on some groceries at about 8:30 on a Sunday evening. And I got a text from Mike, and he was like, "Hey, my business is about to get really busy. And from the look of things, you may need some work. And so if you're willing to help," he goes, show up at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. And I looked at my wife and I said, "I'm going to be real bored if I don't do something." So I showed up at 9:45 the next morning to track some freight. And my plan to do the daycare thing was still intact. And because of COVID, it was just pushed off until ultimately one of my partners just said, we actually can't do this anymore. And here I am. I'm still here. I always joke with people. I said, I'm going to be at Elite until COVID's over. And I don't know if we want to call it over just yet. But ironically, I was here for, a pretty long period of time. And it just happened to coincide with COVID. So, it was an interesting ride, to say the least, but I'm very happy that I took the jump and put my best foot forward.
Yeah. I always like hearing people's paths into logistics. I mean, I'll save my horror story for a different time, but like it involved being a lawyer, then selling office supplies door to door, and then somehow fumbling my way into freight. So I understand that there's an adjustment period. What are some adjustments that you've had to make? Like, what surprised you about the industry?
There's many things outside of your control. And you need to be comfortable and understand that every day when you show up, you can really only control a couple things. And I tell all of our new hires 3 things. Don't take anything personal. People can get very upset for reasons that are not your fault. It's your job to provide resolution and solutions to whatever issue arises, be it carrier or customer related. And every day when you walk through the door, you can control your attitude and your effort. Other than that, weather, loading delays, tech issues, you have no control. So accept them, adapt, pivot, do what you need to do to get the job done and service your freight. But I think just the amount of things that can potentially go wrong, like every load is kind of an individual project, if you will, is kind of how I view it. And there's so many things that can go wrong on every project that when you're doing, 1,500 projects a week, like that's a lot of opportunity for issues. And if you get overwhelmed by the things that happen outside of your control, you're not going to make it very long.
Yeah, I agree with that. For me, a big part was always like you have your uncontrollables and then you have your controllables, right? Make sure those controllables are actually under control. You know, because like if you don't control those, they're going to get mixed in with the other stuff, and everything is going to be a nightmare, literally all of the time.
Yep.
How did you scale up your knowledge of the industry over the past few years here? Was it just you just get thrown in?
Yeah, honestly, I did. Again, I alluded to Mike was like, "Hey, can you help out?" I started tracking, and I knew about his business. So it wasn't like I was starting from square one. I think like some of our new hires do. It was just immerse yourself. I'm a person that kind of learns well. I can teach myself things pretty well. Didn't have to study in high school, and when I got to college, I had to study, and I had to figure that out, and really kind of taught myself how to learn, and that's really applied in everything I've done, I think, in my professional career. But just immersing myself, asking lots of questions to the people around me that have been here, that have seen different things, and have the experience. Reaching out to people, industry people like yourself, and having conversations. It turns lights on and probes you to think critically about what you're doing, and just have a deeper understanding of what we do, because logistics is an incredibly complex industry, and there's always something to learn, always.
Yeah, you heard my my intro and outro to these videos. Obviously, there's always something more to learn here.
Yeah.
So you spent a lot of time in other industries. What are some things from your previous career that have been like particularly transferable to your new role?
So I was a finance and economics major in college, and a financial advisor for almost 5 years, and really worked in finance and investments the entire time, and so all of those economic indicators go into pricing freight and really the price of a truck. And so when I'm reading some of these articles and I'm trying to take all of the data into consideration, there are so many factors that go into the trucking market and the price of that commodity that I think some people try to simplify it. And I try to read all the perspectives, positive, negative, indifferent, and really try to formulate my own opinion, right or wrong. I'm not one to just read something and go, oh, okay, that's what's going to happen. Again, break it down, think critically, formulate your own opinion, and educate your customers. Really is, I think, the number one thing. Large enterprise shippers, they have access to the data, but a lot of the small to medium sized customers that don't move a ton of freight, they're not paying tens of thousands of dollars for market intelligence. And so keeping them abreast of what's actually happening, when you have to ask for more money, explaining why, and then when you're able to reduce your rate, right? You need to do that because somebody else is going to call on them and be $500 lower, and they're going to call you and say, why the hell are you charging me so much money? And so you need to be proactive. And I think it's again, taking my finance and econ background and applying it to the trucking market, I think has really helped me price freight accurately. And as an advisor, this is a relationship business. I was trying to land, people with $5 or $10 million. So it was all about relationships, and I was able to transfer those skills as well.
That's interesting. I think that, at least in my experience, a lot of people don't realize how complicated the industry can be. So when you talk about like finance and analytics to somebody who's just starting in the industry, or even to some like seat level folks who just don't have exposure to that, a lot of times they don't realize just because they don't have that exposure. So I think it's cool that that you mentioned that aspect of it. What about like the reverse? What are some things in brokerage that you've learned that would have been applicable to your previous career?
I think that's a pretty good question.
Thanks.
Honest, yeah. I think I have to think more critically about that one. But I think because we are on the front lines of what is happening, logistics drives the economy, right? And I think a lot of what we see is a leading indicator of what is happening. I mean, there's some other, economic data points that come out from the BLS and things of that nature. But I think I would have been able to foresee how different industries, specifically as it relates to the stock market, and making investment and capital allocation decisions. I think having the insight from this role would have helped me be a better investor. And I try to do that on my own, but I think if I were dedicated to it, I'd be even better.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm going to make that question more broad. Not just you, like any person in the industry, what are some skills that you think people learn in brokerage that are applicable anywhere? And to give some context, like I ask people this sometimes, and for some people you get the response of, well, I was in brokerage for 10 years and all I really learned was the rate from Chicago to Atlanta, right? And to me, that's a really depressing way to approach the industry because there's just so much more there to learn and so many other skills. Hopefully you agree. Otherwise, I'm setting you up for a disastrous question.
No,
but like, what are some things you think people learn in brokerage?
So, I've been privileged to kind of move around and do different things. And if, I tell everybody, every business needs the person that wants to come in and do their job for 10 years, right? They want to come in, they're happy 8 to 5, they do their job really well. They don't want any more, any less. Every business needs those type of people. Then you have people that are a lot hungrier and want to move up and progress quickly. I'm more on the latter. And so I've been able to do more. Communication, I think, is huge in this industry. And just being more proactive in your communication, whether it's good or bad. A lot of people hate having tough conversations or delivering bad news. And I would say, I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I think this industry hardens you a little bit and makes those tough conversations that you need to go maybe have in your personal life or really anywhere else. If you want to manage people, you're going to be prepared. If you have to deliver bad news to a customer and you're just a customer service rep and you've got to inform a customer of a claim or it's never fun, but it's something you have to do. And quite frankly, the sooner you do it, the better off you are. If you sit on it for 3 days, they're going to find out. You would have been better off just telling them. I think communication is really the biggest. And if you're in a broker role or a customer sales role, those sales skills, I think are really important and would translate in any sales role. This is, in my opinion, I think one of the most difficult industries you can sell in, quite frankly.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I really like the communication point, and I completely agree with it because it's not like you're just calling up your friend and shooting the shit with them. Like you're calling up potentially Fortune 100 customers and having very difficult conversations, and it requires tact, negotiation, knowledge of their business, knowledge of them personally. I mean, it's like that's a legitimate skill that you're developing that I think, not to go off on my soapbox here, but it's something that people don't necessarily realize they're doing as they're doing it.
Yep. And it's both written and verbal too, right? We do a lot of business. I'm a phone guy. I'd much rather just pick up the phone and have a conversation. But we need to work the way our customers and our partners work. If they only email, that's the way we need to communicate. So you become better, I think, across all aspects of communication, and not just one or the other. And I think that really makes you a well-rounded person as well.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that one up. I think that one's huge for all people in brokerage. We're keeping these short, so I'm going to wrap it up now. That was all great advice. Like I really appreciate you hopping on today. Like the industry is super complicated. There's always more to learn. Dustin, if someone wants to reach out to you, how do they do it?
2 ways: email, phone. I rarely answer my work line, to be honest. My cell phone is way better. It's 570-856-2787. And my email address is my first and last name at elitetransit.com. And that's dustin.widdoss@elitetransit.com. And you can also check us out at elitetransit.com and elsewhere on social media.
All right. Perfect, Dustin. Thanks again for being on today and taking the time. Looking forward to seeing more from you guys at Elite Transit Solutions.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on, Nick. It was a great time. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.